Hello YouTube and welcome to the Silent Code Dev. And today guys, we're going to be talking about the CSS Box Model. Now you've probably heard this term before and you think it's some super complicated thing, which it's not, right? So I've pulled out the MDN web docs. Let's just read what it says. So when laying out a document, the browser's rendering engine represents each element as a rectangular box according to the standard CSS basic box model. CSS determines the size, position, and properties, color, background, border, size, blah, 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 of these boxes. So every box is composed of 4 parts defined by their respective edges: the content edge, padding edge, border edge, and margin edge. So you probably read this before and you're like super confused about the box model. So you know what I think? I think it's better that we actually go to the let's just go here. I already have an index file and I have a style, okay? And I'm just gonna show you guys what the box model is. Very simple, okay? So let's just create a div and we're gonna call it box, and we're gonna have a text. We're just gonna have text here, okay? So I'm just gonna set this to 100%, okay? And yeah, so as you guys can see, I'm actually gonna add a color. I'm gonna go to the CSS file and I'm gonna add a background color to red, okay? Or maybe yellow, so you guys can see. So as you guys can see, the reason it's spanning all the way across the width of the viewport, like you can see it's always spanning across, is because div element are displayed as block, right? Everything by default. So nothing is happening, as you guys can see, because it's already, this is the default value of a div element, right? It's displaying as block, which means that it's gonna span if there's nothing blocking it, right? If I put something here, it's not gonna span, but if there's nothing, it's gonna span all across and it's gonna fill the space, right? That's the block. It's gonna create a block. So the box model is basically explaining you, this is the box model, right? This is a representation of the box model. So in the box model, you have margin, right? As you guys can see, 8 margin, because HTML by default have styling. So I'm gonna remove all the styling here just to explain to you guys, okay? So let's just go here and let's do margin 0 and padding 0, okay? So this is a new universal thing, a universal symbol that you use in CSS to reset all, like this means reset everything, right? You reset margin, reset the padding to 0, okay? So this is the div element, right? Where you see my mouse and it's showing you the width and the height, right? The width is 720. If I move this right here, it's gonna change, right? It's gonna change because this is spanning, of course, the width port. I mean the viewport, right? The screen. So now it's 902 in width, as you guys can see here, 902 and 18, right? So the whole entire thing here is the div element. This is the box model, okay? So this is the content, okay? And here it's showing you. So padding is the space inside the content, right? The box model is basically here. This is the box model, okay? This is the box model. So do you have the border here? You have the padding, so you have to make this distinction. Padding is the space within a content or within the box model. The box, the element, div element, is the spacing inside, and the margin is the spacing outside. So just to give you guys an example, I just need to demonstrate this to you guys so you guys understand. So we're gonna start with the margin, right? We're gonna start with margin. I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna copy another one. You guys can see we have 2 div elements on the page, okay? So what happens if I apply margin? Okay, so I'm gonna do margin. They're both gonna have margin, let's say 20 pixels and 0 pixel. So what I'm saying here is that the margin, this is top and bottom. Top and bottom, each div element is going to have 20 pixel up, 20 pixel down. Okay, let's see what happens. And this is left, right, which is going to have 0. You don't want it to have spacing outside, left and right, just top and bottom, right? I click save. As you guys can see, now the first div element, it has spacing outside the box, outside the div element. 20 pixel top, 20 pixel bottom. Okay, and you guys can see because the margin is represented by the orange color here, and the same thing is here, right? The reason it's not adding, because you guys see like it's here, the first div element is adding margin to the bottom, and the other div element is adding margin top. So you would think that they would multiply and add 40 pixels. Actually, there's something in CSS called margin collapse. So they're basically collapsing and they both have, like, they're showing 20 pixels. So, but this, don't get confused by that, right? This is doing margin top and bottom 20 pixels. And this one is also doing the same, right? So they're doing the same thing. So you can see when you apply margin, it's pushing the element outside, right? Pushing element outside. It's not going to do the same thing with padding. Okay, but this is margin. This is margin, right? This is the box CSS box model showing you. So margin 20 and 20. Now let's go to border. Okay, border is what separates the, that's actually the box model, right? The box model is the border, because the border is in between margin and padding, right? So if you add padding, you're adding space within the content, which means that you're going to expand the content, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add a border so you guys can see. We're going to add a border of 10 pixels, solid black. Okay, so as you guys can see, now we have a border of like margin and border, right? So the border is putting, you guys can see 10 pixel of border around the content. Okay, so it's not taking in the margin. The margin is outside, as you guys can see here. It's outside. Let me click this one. It's outside, and then you have the border, which is in between the margin and padding, right? It's wrapping the content, and it's wrapping the padding, right? This is the border. Okay, the margin's outside, that's why it's like spaced out like that. Okay, now let's do padding. Okay, padding, as I said, the padding is the space inside the content, inside the box model. It's the space inside it. So let's do padding 20 pixel and 0 pixel. So as you guys can see, when I added padding, you guys can see the green color here. Padding adds space within the content, within the box model. Okay, this is the content, this is the div element. When I click it, you guys can see div element, and the padding is the spacing outside the content, right? I mean inside the box element, inside. Okay, it's, so when you add padding, it's going to expand the content inside by space, right? Space. So the border, this is again, this is what the box model is, and it's here. So you, when you add border, you're adding that's the content between margin and it's in between margin and padding, right? It's wrapping, it's essentially wrapping the padding and the content. Okay, and the margin is the space outside the content, outside the border, outside the div element. And you use margin, usually you use margin to push elements away, and padding you use to space things like buttons or boxes, you know, things like that. Now we have another thing in CSS, and that's what you usually do. That's what most people get confused, right? So if I do, let's say I'm going to remove everything here, and I'm going to say width 300 pixels and height 100 pixel. And we're going to have one. I don't want to confuse you guys. So as you guys can see, we have 300. It's actually adding 300 and 100. 300 in width, 100 pixels in height. What happens if I add margin? Or what happens if I add padding, right? So if I add padding of 20 pixels, it's not going to include this, right? So the content is actually 300 width and 100 pixel height, but now it's not, right? Because now we have padding, so it actually makes the content, I mean, makes the div element bigger than it actually is, right? And we don't want that. We want the padding to be included into the actual content. So in CSS, we have something called border box sizing, border box, right? So you guys saw that? As soon as I added border box, it's going to do CSS is going to do a calculation. So when you declare a width and a height to a div element and you add padding, it's going to include this into this, right? So as you guys can see here, now, as you guys can see in the div box, I've declared the width 300 pixels and the height 100 pixels. But if you look into the element here, the div element, it's actually the width is now 260 pixels and the height is 60 pixels. Why is that? That's because I added a box sizing border box, which means that when you add a padding, CSS is going to do a calculation. It's going to remove the original width and height numbers, and it's going to include the padding, so you get the correct sizing, right? Because if you don't do that, it's not going to be included, right? Now you're going to have the width and height, it's fixed, and you're going to add extra width, extra height, right? So when you're doing CSS reset, you also want to add a border. You want to add box sizing border box, right? So when you do that, the padding and margin will be included, right? Because this is also margin. No, this is only padding. Sorry, padding. So yeah. So I know it sounds confusing, guys, but that's basically what the CSS box model is. It's just understanding that everything in CSS is a box, right? Everything is a box in CSS. Everything, every single thing. I can show you guys that here. You know, you can have div, you can have button, you can have anything, right? Anything, everything in CSS is a box. Okay, and that's basically what it means. It's a box. When you understand the CSS box model, you can basically understand what you're doing when you're creating a website, right? Because now you know that margin pushes elements outside itself. Border adds a border around the content, right? And the padding adds space inside. So for example, when would you want to add padding? Let's say you have let's remove this. Just gonna add this. Okay, so you guys can see that the text here is all the way to the left. Okay, and we want to add spacing, right? We don't want it to be all the way close to the left side. So what we can do is we can use padding, because you know that padding is space within the content, right? So you can do padding left 20 pixels, and it's gonna add 20 pixel. It's gonna add the padding spacing here, right? 20 pixel. It's gonna push the element inside because padding is spacing inside. Okay, and if you want the entire div element to not be all the way on the top and on the sides, or let's just say the top, you can just do margin top 20 pixels and it's going to move down. So that's essentially it. That's the box model CSS. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to comment, like, subscribe, and bye.